Joining me right now is Republican Wyoming Senator John Barrasso. Senator, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
On a tough day, your reaction to what has taken place, is there anything that could have been done to stop this beforehand?
Well, we're still getting more information, but it's a terrible tragedy. It's utterly devastating news. I visited with R-Wyo, the senator from Florida, earlier this morning and told him that all of America is grieving, as are all the people of Florida. We are standing with him.
It's true. We all are, for sure. We want to turn to the latest in Washington with you, of course, a bipartisan group of senators calling themselves the Common Sense Coalition, reaching an immigration agreement. It would increase border security as well as grant legal status to the Dreamers. This coalition is scrambling for support ahead of the deadline set for the end of the week. There is the possibility of a vote today. What do you expect on this, Senator?
Well, in terms of immigration, from my point of view, I'm looking for border security, which is keeping our country safe, enforcement of the current laws, but looking for a solution for these young people who were brought to the country at a very young age. That's part of it. President Trump has laid out a four-pillar plan, which is a very reasonable, I think actually a very generous plan to give us the border security that we need, and then deal with the DACA program, but also with people that are brought here through chain migration and with a diversity lottery that I think must be ended. So we're going to have some votes today. We need to come to some solutions on this, but I'm not going to compromise border security for anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Lindsey Graham said that this deal is going to establish a pathway to citizenship, but he's very clear that the deal will not deal with the so-called diversity visa lottery. That obviously prioritizes immigration from countries that send fewer immigrants to the U.S. or family reunification. Why isn't he dealing with this lottery, knowing that this is very important to the president?
Well, I think the president is right to talk about eliminating the diversity lottery and focus on skills, bringing people to the United States that can make the kind of contributions that we're looking for, the skills that we need. So we'll see actually what can get to 60 votes today in the Senate. But to me, the focus is keeping our country safe, and we need to deal with the immigration of those people who are brought here illegally. When you use the phrase path to citizenship, that is an area of concern, because I know so many of us are focused on trying to give them some legal status, some relief from the worry and the anxiety that they're going to be removed from the country when they were brought here as children, but not at the expense and the cost of a citizenship at this point. So that's the debate topic.
Do you expect the president then to veto any bill that doesn't include the visa lottery?
Well, you're going to have to get something past the Senate as well as past the House, and that comes then to the president for a signature. But I think the president has been very forceful and actually very generous in what he's offered with his four pillars. And I think as you stay along those lines, then you're going to get a solution. And we need to get an outcome, not just a political vote that satisfies some people's wishes, but doesn't get to a result.
Well, that's absolutely right. So what do you think is going on here, Senator? Do they not really want a true deal? I mean, the president has been so clear over and over again talking about this lottery that seems ridiculous. And chain migration as well. Do they not want to get a deal done?
Well, I agree with you, Maria. It makes you wonder, after the Schumer shutdown, where the Democrats shut down the country by prioritizing illegal immigration over American citizens, you would think they would have been ready with a bill that they agreed to, but yet we've been discussing this for several days. They haven't brought a bill to the floor yet. So it does make you wonder if they're just looking for political debate and discussion and to have this as an issue rather than looking for a solution. I'm looking for a solution that gives us the security we need for our country, as well as deals with these young people who have been here, brought here through no fault of their own at a very young age.
So what happens if nothing gets done by March 5th, by the deadline?
Well, there's the DACA program. Now, some judges have ruled on that in California. That has now been appealed to the Supreme Court, because I believe what President Obama did was illegal to set up this program, and we're going to end up going with a Supreme Court issue related to that. But I think we need to get to a solution to deal with it legislatively. That's how it should have been dealt with originally, not with the presidential edict by President Obama in the last administration.
Senator, let me move on to the infrastructure plan. The White House releasing their hotly anticipated infrastructure plan yesterday. According to multiple reports, President Trump is calling for a 25-cent increase to the federal gas tax in order to fund this plan. That federal levy is 18.4 cents a gallon on retail gasoline, 24.4 cents a gallon on diesel, As you know, Senator, this increase would push the diesel tax to nearly 50 cents a gallon. You were in the infrastructure meeting with the president yesterday. What can you tell us about this?
Well, you're right, Maria. I was in the meeting with the president. The president's plan, I think, is a very good one to work to repair the crumbling bridges and roads and the waterways and the dams and the things that we need to do for infrastructure in this country. There is a discussion about how to pay for it. We've just passed this massive tax cut for the American people, which is very successful in the minds of the people and in their pocketbooks, as well as for the economy. So I'm not one that wants to raise taxes. The other part of this, Maria, though, is the streamlining and simplifying of the process of getting permits to build. And the president knows better than anybody how the delays by government can make it harder and more expensive to do these projects. We had a project in Wyoming, Maria, it was a safety project on the highway, 14 years to get the permits, 10,000 hours by a Wyoming state staff workers to get it done. The project took less than 2 years to complete, all because of the regulations and things that I think were absolutely unnecessary. We need to be able to get to build these projects sooner, and the president is calling to get all this permitting done within 2 years.
Well, that's really important, and you've done so much on the Finance Committee in terms of rolling back regulations and getting some of this red tape out of the way. I understand why that's very important, and I'm sure we'll see more of that. But what about this gas tax idea? You like it?
Well, no, I don't like it, but others do, and it'll be a point of discussion. And the question is, how do you pay for this? The budget bill that just passed has $20 billion in it. That's, I think, a very strong down payment on doing this process over a whole 10-year plan. It's going to take that long to rebuild the infrastructure that we need done to help our overall economy. But it's about jobs and the economy and quality of life for people. So I'm in favor of what the president is proposing. My preference is to pay for it ways other than a gas tax. If you talk about a user fee, that means people in electric cars won't be paying, and it also means that the gas tax right now is used not just for roads and highways and construction and bridges, it's also used to paying for transit and other systems. And I don't think if you do that, the money ought to be going for things other than actually the repair work for our bridges and roads and highways.
I think you make a good point, but where does the money come from, right, Senator? I mean, here we are talking about trillion-dollar deficits once again after that 2-year budget deal last week that you signed and you voted for. Where does the money come from?
Well, I think we're going to see massive economic growth, and I think we're seeing it right now. You're seeing the numbers up, the number of people working now that weren't working prior to in the last administration since President Trump was elected, and over 2 million new people working. We have 4 million people with bonuses, and tax revenue is ultimately going to go up when you have more people working and paying taxes, even though all of those workers are paying fewer taxes, which actually 90% of people are going to be seeing more take-home pay because of lower taxes. But overall, the revenue coming in because of this new economic growth, I think, is going to be higher.
Yeah, I mean, the growth of 4% is what people are talking about in 2018. Are you worried about inflation that comes along with growth, Senator?
Well, that's always part of the discussion. We haven't seen it up till this point. You've seen the markets changing dramatically, and you've been reporting on that accurately. But I'm so supportive of what the president has done in terms of the tax cuts, the regulatory relief. All of these things have contributed to a strong, healthy, growing economy. This president ran and said, I'm going to focus on jobs, the economy, paychecks, prosperity. And President Trump's delivering on that, Maria.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. Senator, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And to you, Senator John Barrasso, joining us there.